It was New Year's Eve, and the house carried the smell of roasted chicken and cinnamon candles, the kind of holiday cheer my parents always staged for appearances. I had just tossed my jacket onto a chair when a knock rattled the front door. My father Richard stiffened while my mother Margaret froze mid-step. When my dad opened the door, I saw a man I hadn't laid eyes on in years, my Uncle Thomas. Just standing there, he seemed to change the air itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes that cut through pretense, he stepped inside without waiting for permission. Silence fell across the room. I sat awkwardly near the couch, wondering why he had reappeared after vanishing for so long. My father offered him a stiff greeting, but before anyone could add a word, Thomas fixed his gaze on me and asked, "Evan, how's the $3 million trust fund I left you?" The words landed like a blow. My mind spun. "What trust fund?" I stammered, my voice cracking. "I've been delivering pizzas just to get by." A muscle jumped in my uncle's jaw. His face darkened as his eyes snapped toward my parents. The warm holiday lights now felt harsh, like interrogation lamps. My father's features turned to stone, while my mother's hands shook as she fussed with napkins that didn't need arranging. Neither of them spoke. Their silence was louder than denial. Thomas's glare was sharp and unyielding. The tension pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. My parents looked cornered, like people caught in a secret they could no longer bury. Then slowly, Thomas turned back to me. He slipped a sealed envelope from his coat and pressed it into my hand. "Your parents have been hiding something," he said firmly. "Inside is the proof. It's time you knew." The world I thought I knew cracked open. I had grown up in a house where silence was heavier than words. Richard, my father, was the kind of man who measured worth in numbers, grades, salaries, possessions. If you failed to meet his standard, you failed him. Margaret, my mother, was gentler in presence but rarely in choice. She usually echoed his views, even when it was clear she wanted to disagree. Her silence was her survival, his control her compliance, and me, caught in the middle, always gasping for air. By the time I was 22, I had stopped hoping to make them proud. I worked long shifts at a pizza shop, driving through icy nights in a car with no heater. My jacket barely held back the cold as I dropped food on strangers' doorsteps. I came home with sore feet and just enough money to scrape by on student loans. I dreamed of more, but dreaming felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. My parents knew how hard I worked, but they never stepped in to help. Richard would sneer when I came home in uniform. "If you studied harder, you wouldn't waste your time with deliveries," he'd say, as if my exhaustion proved laziness. Margaret never corrected him. She'd just lower her eyes and clear the table, pretending the words hadn't been spoken. But they had, and they carved into me every time. In that house, I was little more than invisible. Every paycheck reminded me how little ground I was gaining. Yet every night under my parents' roof reminded me how much I depended on them. Rent in the city was impossible. Tuition kept creeping higher, and the debt clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Friends my age were signing leases, mapping out careers, and talking about futures. I was scrubbing pizza sauce from my jacket sleeves and pretending not to hear my father's sighs of disappointment. Holidays only made the difference sting worse. New Year's Eve was the one I dreaded most. Richard and Margaret would dress the house in silver garlands and glowing candles, crafting a picture of cheer as if nothing was wrong. They invited neighbors and a few cousins, filled glasses with wine, and spoke of achievements that were never mine. Richard would laugh the loudest, boasting about our family's stability, while I sat on the sidelines clutching my phone like a shield, wishing I could vanish into the background. That year, though, something about the night carried a heavier weight. I had just finished another long shift. My hands smelled faintly of garlic butter and my legs throbbed from endless stairs. When I stepped through the front door, the warmth of the room should have comforted me, but instead it felt rehearsed, like I had walked into a play where everyone else knew the script and I was just the unwanted extra. Richard glanced at me once, muttered about appearances, and turned away. Margaret urged me to change quickly so I wouldn't embarrass them in front of company. I wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. I slipped into a clean shirt and sat at the edge of the living room, scrolling through my phone while laughter filled the air. The louder the celebration grew, the smaller I felt. Then came the knock. Sharp, deliberate, cutting through the noise. Richard froze mid-step. Margaret's smile faltered. Guests exchanged puzzled looks. When the door swung open, Thomas stepped inside. He wasn't a man who showed up for small talk or polite gatherings. Years earlier, he and my father had split over something no one ever explained, and he had disappeared without looking back. His sudden presence was like thunder breaking a still sky. He carried himself with the weight of someone who lived by his own rules, and the moment he entered, the entire atmosphere shifted. His eyes landed on me almost at once. Before Richard could even greet him, Thomas asked, his voice cutting clean through the chatter. "Evan, how's the $3 million trust fund I left you?" The words echoed in my head, unreal. The room froze. Guests stared. My stomach twisted and my mind emptied. Richard's jaw locked. Margaret gripped the edge of the table. "I don't have a trust fund," I said, my voice uneven. "I've been delivering pizzas just to survive." For a moment, no one moved. The twinkle of holiday lights reflected mockingly in wine glasses and silver ornaments, as if mocking the silence. Thomas's expression hardened, his anger visible in every line of his face. His glare shifted to my parents, burning with unspoken accusation. They stood there like statues, unable to deny or explain. The silence between them stretched thin, sharp as wire pulled to breaking. Richard's lips pressed tight. Margaret's trembling hands gave her away. The guests shifted in their seats, caught between confusion and unease, waiting for someone to speak. But no one did. Some guests coughed nervously, pretending to study their drinks, but most of them stayed quiet, waiting to see what would unfold. Thomas didn't wait. He stepped forward, his boots heavy against the floor, and fixed his gaze on me. "I set up that trust fund when you were a child," he said, his voice steady but sharp. $3 million meant to give you a foundation, a life without the weight of debt. You're telling me you know nothing about it?" My throat closed up, but I forced myself to speak. "I know nothing. I've been broke since high school. I've been working nights delivering pizzas just to keep the lights on." A murmur rippled through the room. Richard's jaw tightened until I could hear his teeth grinding. Margaret lowered her eyes, fussing with the silverware as if rearranging forks might shield her from the storm. Thomas's glare shifted to them, his expression burning. "Richard, Margaret, care to explain why your son doesn't even know his inheritance exists?" His voice thundered through the living room, cutting through the murmurs. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Richard cleared his throat, but no words came. Margaret's lips parted, but only silence escaped. My pulse pounded in my ears. For years I had swallowed their control, their harshness, their disappointment. But this wasn't discipline or pride. This was betrayal carved deep into the walls of my life. "Answer him," I demanded, louder than I expected. "What trust fund is he talking about? Why didn't I know?" Richard snapped his head toward me, his eyes blazing. "This is not the time or the place," he hissed. "Then when is it?" I shot back, my voice breaking but fierce. "When I'm 50 and still killing myself for nothing, Gasps rose from the guests. Margaret reached out to steady me, but I pulled back. I didn't want comfort. I wanted the truth. Thomas's voice cut through again, sharp as steel. You think you can hide behind silence? Do you know how hard I fought with our father to make sure Evan had security? Do you know the promises I made to him before he died? His finger jabbed toward Richard. You were supposed to honor that. You were supposed to protect your son. Richard's face twisted with anger and panic. You don't know what you're talking about, Thomas. You left, you abandoned this family. You don't get to barge in after all these years and accuse us. I left because of you, Thomas shot back, his voice trembling with fury. Because of your greed and lies. And now I see you've dragged Evan into the same darkness. The knot in my chest grew tighter. Heat flushed my face. My palms were slick with sweat. I turned to Margaret, silently begging her to deny it, to give me something to hold on to. She only shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. Mom, I whispered, my voice breaking. Is it true? Her eyes closed, and that was all I needed. Rage poured through me, years of exhaustion crashing down in an instant. The late nights, the hunger, the shame of Richard's constant criticism. It all boiled over. You knew? I shouted. All this time you let me believe I was worthless, scraping by while a trust fund sat waiting? How could you do that to me? Richard slammed his hand against the table, rattling the glasses. You don't understand what we sacrificed. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Pressure, I barked. I was eating leftover crusts on my breaks while you wore new suits and took vacations. Don't talk to me about pressure. The room went still. The guests staring in horror at the wreckage of a family tearing itself apart. A few people excused themselves quietly and slipped into the night, but most stayed, frozen in their spots. The room felt thick with betrayal and disbelief. Thomas didn't hesitate. He closed the distance between us, his steps measured, his voice dropping so low it still carried authority. Evan, they've kept this from you for years, he said. I won't stand by any longer. He reached into his coat and drew out a heavy envelope, its flap sealed tight. He extended it toward me. My hand shook as I reached for it. Richard and Margaret stared at the paper like it was a weapon. What is it? I asked, barely audible. The truth, Thomas answered. Your grandfather left this for you. Everything you need to know is inside. I took the envelope. Its weight settled in my palm like a promise or a threat. Richard lurched forward, a reflexive move to snatch it back, but Thomas stepped between us without breaking eye contact. Margaret's face folded. Tears traced quiet paths down her cheeks. Please, Evan, she whispered. Don't open it. Why? I demanded, pressing the envelope to my chest. What could be worse than what you've already done? Letting me believe I had nothing while something waited for me. Their silence answered me before their voices could. In that hush, the truth revealed itself in a way their denials never could. They hadn't been protecting me. They'd been protecting themselves. The envelope was addressed in my grandfather's bold, deliberate handwriting. My name sat across the front like a stamp of ownership. I stared at it until the letters blurred. This wasn't just paper. It was a key to years of secrets, and it made my stomach twist. Read it, Thomas urged softly. You deserve to know. Don't let them keep deciding what's best for you. His tone had a gentleness that felt almost like protection. Richard stepped forward, red with a fury I recognized too well. You will not open that, he snapped. His voice carried the same iron control he'd used my whole life. That letter wasn't meant for you. Margaret reached toward me, her hands trembling. Evan, please, she begged. Listen to your father. It will only bring you pain. We were trying to spare you. Spare me? I laughed then, but there was no humor in it. Spare me by letting me rot while something waited? Spare me by keeping me small so you can feel in charge? My words hit the room like thrown stones. The guests clustered at the back leaned forward, hungry for the next piece of the blowout they'd been pulled into. Richard's voice climbed to a roar. You live in my house, my rules. That paper will not be opened while you're under my roof. For the first time, something inside me didn't shrink. I straightened, feeling a strange calm resolve settle over the trembling. Then maybe I shouldn't be living under your roof anymore, I said. The sentence surprised me with how steady it sounded. Shock flickered across Richard's face. Margaret's hands flew to her mouth. The air buzzed with the suddenness of the choice I'd been forced into. The envelope lay heavy in my grip, and for the first time in my life the future didn't feel like something other people decided for me. Thomas stepped closer, resting a steady hand on my shoulder. You don't have to let them control you anymore, he said quietly. His presence anchored me, a shield against the fear Richard and Margaret had always used to keep me obedient. I turned back to them, my voice breaking free, louder than I had ever dared. All my life you told me I wasn't enough. You watched me work myself to the bone, made me believe I had to fight for every scrap while you knew there was something waiting for me. You let me drown while holding the life raft behind your backs. Why? Why would you do this to me? Margaret shook her head, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked her body. Richard glared at me, but for the first time I saw something raw flicker behind the anger. Fear. Not of Thomas. Not of the guests. Fear of me finally knowing. You wouldn't understand, he spat. That money wasn't meant for you to waste. It wasn't for a boy who couldn't stand on his own 2 feet. We used it to hold this family together. The words slammed into me, knocking the breath from my chest. My voice cracked as I shouted back. You stole my future just to protect your pride. You made me think I was nothing just so you could keep your image intact. The room buzzed with unease. Margaret reached for me, but Thomas stopped her, his voice cold and sharp. Enough. He deserves the truth. I looked down at the envelope again, my fingers trembling against the seal. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. If I opened it, everything would change. If I didn't, I'd remain trapped in the cage they had built around me. I'm opening it, I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. Richard lunged toward me, but Thomas shoved him back with surprising force. Gasps erupted from the guests. Margaret cried harder, her voice breaking. Please, Evan, don't. We did this for you. We thought we were protecting you. Her words stung, but I shook my head. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourselves. Thomas's eyes met mine, firm and steady. You need to know. Don't let their fear chain you anymore. I slid my thumb under the flap. The sound of tearing paper cut through the silence like thunder. Richard and Margaret froze, their faces etched in panic. The guests leaned forward, some holding their breath, others whispering nervously. Thomas stayed at my side, his hand still gripping my shoulder, his gaze fixed on the letter. I unfolded the thick paper, my eyes blurring with tears. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, about breaking free from the lies that had defined my life. The handwriting was unmistakably my grandfather's, strong, deliberate, carrying a care I had never felt from my father. Evan, it began, this trust was created for you alone. It is my gift to ensure you never endure the kind of struggle I saw your father impose on others. Use it wisely, but know it belongs to you and no one else. If you are reading this, then those I trusted most have hidden the truth from you. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. My breath caught in my throat as the words settled into me, tearing apart the world I thought I knew. The words swam through my tears, but I forced myself to keep going. Inside the envelope were legal papers, stamped, notarized, official in every way. My grandfather had left me $3 million in a trust fund. It should have been mine the day I turned 18. Instead, for 4 long years I had lived in poverty while Richard and Margaret bled that money dry to fund a life they never earned. Gasps spread through the crowd like fire. Margaret let out a broken sob and buried her face in her hands. Richard's fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. I lifted my head, meeting their eyes with a rage I had never allowed myself to show. My voice shook, but every word struck the air like a hammer. You stole from me. You stole my future. Richard's face twisted with fury and desperation. You don't understand what we sacrificed. That money wasn't for you to waste. We used it to keep this house, to hold together the life we built. Without it, we'd have lost everything. I laughed bitterly, the sound raw. Lost everything? I lost everything. I lost years believing I was worthless. I lost the chance to chase my own dreams. I spent nights wondering how I'd pay rent, scraping by with nothing while you had everything. Everything that was meant for me. And you did it knowing it wasn't yours. Margaret dropped to her knees, her sobs echoing against the walls. We only wanted to protect you from carrying too much too soon. We thought it was best. Her words cut deep, splitting something inside me. I had spent my whole life waiting for her to choose me over Richard, to finally defend me. And even now, when the truth was laid bare, all she could offer were excuses. Thomas's voice thundered through the room, silencing the noise. Protect him? You robbed him. You lied to your own son, and left him to live like a beggar while you fattened yourselves on his inheritance. He pointed at Richard, his eyes blazing. You've always been selfish. Now everyone can see it. Richard snarled, his voice breaking with rage. And you think you're any better, Thomas? You abandoned this family years ago. You don't know the meaning of sacrifice. Thomas stepped closer, his face nearly touching Richard's. His voice was steel. I know sacrifice better than you ever will. That's why I fought to make sure Evan had something you couldn't ruin. And now you've proven me right. I looked at them, Richard's fury, Margaret's tears, Thomas's righteous anger, and for the first time I felt steady. I wasn't the frightened child they had controlled. I was the one holding the truth, and with it, the power they had worked so hard to bury. I raised the letter high, my voice strong and clear. This is proof. Proof you lied to me. Proof you let me suffer for no reason. Proof you chose yourselves over me. The guests stirred, whispers and gasps breaking into open judgment. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others pulled out their phones, recording every word. Richard's face drained of color as he realized the humiliation would spread beyond this room. I turned to Margaret. My voice softened, though the edge remained. You could have told me once. Just once, slipped me a note, whispered it when he wasn't around. But you chose silence. You chose him over me. Her sobs deepened, her words broken. I'm sorry, Evan, I thought I was protecting you. Too little. Too late. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. My hands no longer trembled. A strange calm settled over me, as though the storm had finally passed and left me standing firm in the wreckage. Thomas rested his hand on my shoulder again, steady and unyielding. You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore, Thomas said, his hand still firm on my shoulder. I'll make sure the trust is restored to you. They can't keep what was meant for you. I nodded, my eyes fixed on Richard and Margaret. You stole from me. You lied to me. And you made me believe I was nothing. I'll never forgive you for that. Richard took a step forward, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. "Evan, you're my son. You can't just turn your back on us." I didn't flinch. I met his gaze and said, "You turned your back on me a long time ago." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Richard's face collapsed into something that almost looked like defeat. Margaret reached for me with trembling hands, but I stepped back. For once I wasn't the boy desperate for their approval. I was the man who had uncovered the truth, and I wasn't letting it go. The letter had revealed more than stolen money. It had exposed who my parents truly were, and there was no going back. The room felt hollow after the storm. Richard stood rigid, his chest rising and falling with silent fury. Margaret sobbed into her hands, her tears spilling like an admission of guilt. The guests no longer whispered. Their expressions said everything: shock, disgust, pity. I had never felt so exposed, yet never so free. The letter in my hand no longer felt like a burden, it felt like armor. For years I believed I was broken, that my failures defined me, that I wasn't strong enough or smart enough. But the truth was clear now. It wasn't weakness holding me down. It was betrayal. Thomas squeezed my shoulder gently. "Now you know," he said, his voice softer, tired, as though this fight had cost him something too. "What you do next is your choice." I met his eyes and nodded. He had been gone for years, but in this moment he was the only one who felt like family. He had fought to protect me even when my parents had twisted everything, and now he was here to help me reclaim what was mine. When I looked back, Richard's face was pale, his eyes darting as if searching for a way to undo what had already been destroyed. Margaret's hands were clasped, trembling as she whispered through her tears, "Evan, please. We never meant to hurt you. We thought we were doing what was best." Her words stung, but I felt no comfort in them. I shook my head slowly. "You didn't protect me. You trapped me. You let me believe I had nothing while you took everything. That's not love, it's control." The truth settled in the air, heavy and final. For the first time I saw my parents not as untouchable figures, but as two flawed people, who chose greed over honesty, control over love. I slipped the letter back into its envelope and tucked it into my jacket. My back straightened, my tears dried, and I turned toward the door. Each step away from them felt like shedding years of weight. "Where are you going?" Richard barked. His voice no longer carried authority. It sounded desperate. "Away," I said simply. "To build the life you tried to steal from me." Margaret reached out as if to stop me, but I walked past without giving her another glance. Thomas followed close behind. At the doorway, he turned back to his brother one last time. "You've lost him," Thomas said coldly, "and you did it to yourself." Then we stepped out into the night. Fireworks cracked in the distance, bursts of color lighting the dark sky as if the world itself was marking the moment I finally broke free. For the rest of the world, the fireworks marked the start of a new year. For me, they marked the beginning of freedom. As Thomas and I walked down the frozen driveway, the crunch of ice beneath our boots, I felt a weight lifting from my chest that had been there for as long as I could remember. My uncle glanced at me and said, "You're stronger than they ever allowed you to see. Now it's your turn to prove it." I nodded, my throat tight, tears gathering in my eyes. But this time they weren't born of despair, they were born of release. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be battles to fight, lawyers to face, and the scars of betrayal to carry. But for the first time I didn't feel powerless. I had evidence. I had someone on my side. And most importantly, I had a future that was mine to claim. As we drove away, I watched the house shrink behind us, its lights fading into the night. It had never truly felt like home, and now it never would. I thought about the years I spent trying to win approval from people who had only seen me as a reflection of their pride, not as their son. I realized then that I would never get the love I longed for from Richard and Margaret. But I had something even greater, the strength to choose my own life. That night etched itself into me like a scar and a promise. Love without honesty is hollow. Family without trust is nothing but performance. And sometimes the very people who insist they are protecting you are the ones you need to protect yourself from. The trust fund was money, yes, but it was also proof. Proof that I mattered. Proof that someone, my grandfather, had believed in me enough to give me a chance. My parents tried to bury that truth to make me doubt myself, but they failed. I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I had been robbed. And now I was reclaiming everything that was mine. As the city skyline rose in the distance, glowing against the night sky, I knew my new chapter had already begun. It wouldn't be written by their lies, it would be written by my truth. And if you're hearing this now, take this with you. No one has the right to steal your story. No one has the right to silence you. You deserve freedom. And once you claim it, no one can ever take it away. If this story struck something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave your thoughts below about what you would have done in my place. And make sure to subscribe for more stories that hit deep and stay with you long after they end.